Hello, everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Meet Me in the Center. My name is Andrew. I had no plans to release another video this week. However, something is happening in Ontario right now that I think should be talked about. And it is Doug Ford deciding to use the Notwithstanding Clause in order to ram illegal legislation that would stop a strike. So what is the Notwithstanding Clause? Who's trying to strike, and why is he trying to stop it? Who is trying to strike are the support staff in schools. Their deal is up, and they're trying to make a new deal. Now, maybe at the end of this video, if it doesn't go too long, I will talk about what I think about that deal, or what they're trying to get. However, it is the support staff in schools that are going to be striking. So who are the support staff in schools? Well, that's people like the EAs. So EAs are people that work with children with disabilities inside the classroom. They might be one-on-one or two-on-one, depending on the type of disability. A lot of EAs help, like, for instance, children with autism in the class to better fit in and be able to actually successfully be part of the class. People like custodians and janitors are in there, as well as before and after school program workers and lunch supervisors. So at lunchtime, teachers take a break because obviously they need to eat lunch and have a break during the day. And so it's people come in to look after the classes and look after them when they're out for their lunch recess. So what is the Notwithstanding Clause, and why is it being used? Well, this is going to be a bit of a history lesson. Bear with me here. So what used to happen is, instead of using this Notwithstanding Clause, Ontario government would just force back to work legislation. It's been used regularly since the 1950s. It basically just says, okay, you've been on strike for this amount of time. It's affecting whatever, and you have to go back now. And once they did that, they would generally just do work to rule, and then potentially later on, either that year or the near year after, they might try to go back on strike again for a little while. However, in 2015, the Supreme Court decided that striking was a charter protected right, and so no longer allowed for back to work legislation. And something that they pointed out in their decision is that Canada has signed a bunch of UN treaties, basically mandating the protection of the right to strike as part of meaningful process of collective bargaining. Now, that being said, if Canada breaks those treaties are broken all the time by countries all over the world. UN has no teeth to go in and stop them. The worst thing that will happen is we'll be seen negatively by the world, essentially. Canada's already kind of in that spot right now. We're in a bit of hot water internationally based on a couple things that have happened. Mainly Justin Trudeau's actions that caused that, but there's some other things now. This would definitely add to that. All right, so what is the Notwithstanding Clause? Because right now it's the only way that he could force them to go back to work. So in the 1980s, Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, was setting up the Charter of Rights and Freedoms with the provinces. So in Canada, you have the Canadian or the Federal Charter of Rights and Freedoms that protects you against the federal government, and then you have the Ontario Charter of Rights and Freedoms that protects you against the Ontario provincial government, or whatever province you're from. And while they were creating that, some of the provinces wanted a back door, basically, in the charter. And it would allow them to override the charter, parts of the charter. Not all parts can be overridden, but it would allow certain parts of the charter to be overridden so that in case there was something in the charter that maybe didn't work. It's very hard to change the Charter of Rights and Freedoms here in Canada. It takes a lot of work and a lot of time to do it. They wanted something that was quicker in case something went horribly wrong in the charter. They would want to be able to put something in, and that was the notwithstanding clause. Pierre Elliott Trudeau didn't actually want that clause in there. I think he understood what could happen and what is now happening in Ontario because of it, but some of the provinces basically said if it's not in there, no, we're not going to create a Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So he kind of had to give in at that point so that everyone could have that provincially. Outside of this happened in the 1980s, and outside of Quebec, I say that for a reason. It's only been used 3 times. So in 40 years, it's been used 3 times outside of Quebec. Now, it's been used 17 times in Quebec, and that just, to me, seems like a very Quebec thing to do. If you know, you know. I'm not going to get too into that, bogged down with tangents or anything like that. But it's been used once in Saskatchewan, once in Alberta, and once in Ontario. So that's how rare this actually is. And then actually it was used by none other than Doug Ford in Ontario. So, and he's also threatened using it multiple other times as well. So he knows he can use it, and he knows it's a way to easily get around the law. And he's kind of been showing, especially with this one, that he's more than willing to do it. So basically what will happen is there's a law being tabled right now in the provincial government. I believe the law is something called Keep Our Children in School or something like that. It's got a very political name. I know children have had a very disrupted teaching because of COVID, so I kind of get that part of it. I don't think that's the only reason he's doing it, though. But anyway, he's brought forth that legislation, and they will pass it. I think he has the majority to pass it, so he will get it passed. And basically, it allows him to override the Charter of Rights and Freedoms for up to a 5-year term. So after 5 years, the current government, 5 years from now, will have to decide, are we going to continue with this legislation, or are we going to end it? They can either choose to continue it for another 5-year term, or they can just end it completely. I hope it gets ended after 5 years, but who knows? I mean, it could just continue, and basically no one in schools would ever be able to strike. So they would have basically no bargaining power when it came to striking anymore. And incidentally, after the I can't say how I know this, but after the support staff went on strike, the teachers were planning on probably going on strike as well this year, potentially. So both of them lose that power, and it's a huge undercutting of the union power. I believe they're both under CUPE, and yeah, I am not for it whatsoever. Any clause like this that allows you just to decide, no, I don't want this to happen right now. How is that a right or a freedom for me? Like, if you can override it at any time for any reason, how is that a freedom or a right for me? It's not. Interestingly, the next 3 weeks, I'm going to be doing stuff on freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and I basically, not to give away the ending there, but I basically come to the same conclusion that if it's, I think George Carlin said it best. It's a set of, what did he say? It's a set of. Sorry, forgive me. I'm very tired today. I've already been up. I didn't get much sleep last night, and I've already been doing a bunch of stuff. And this is just a short time I have to actually talk about this. But he basically said rights are a set of current privileges that can be taken away at any point, and Ford is proving it with this. Ford, by the way, is very pro-business, and so he can claim that this is all about the children as much as he wants. I know some of the things he's wanted to do. He wanted to power in Ontario is basically run by a company connected to the government in order to better create rules and protect Ontario citizens for that. And he wanted to take away some of those protections, and he wanted to partially get rid of, like I said, get rid of those protections, and he wanted to make it private. He also wanted to do the same thing with healthcare, where it sets up like a 2-tier system where you've got private healthcare or socialized healthcare. That if that ever passes, I'm done with it. Like I'm already at the point where what is Canada doing right now? Like, and with this in Ontario, I'm almost at the point where like there's very little keeping me here. Where the fuck am I going to live from this point forward? But for right now, I'm gonna tough it out. But maybe in the future, I'm gonna have to look at places I could live. Yeah. So basically, what this does, whether he implied it to do it or not, is it's cutting the legs out from under the unions. It's basically taking away of all their bargaining power. Because so if they can't go on strike, they're not allowed to strike. They still have a disputed contract. So if they don't come to a conclusion to that, they're just going to have to they basically work for the current rate of their contract, which they're saying is too little. And they have to work at that rate until an agreement is made. Now, that being said, once an agreement is made, they are back paid to the end of the contract. So they will get that money back in the end, but there is no way they're going to get what they want, anywhere near what they want, if this legislation is allowed. And so it's basically cutting out the union's rights, in my opinion. It's a horrible go-around. I don't like that there's a notwithstanding clause. Interestingly, two of the other times it was used was actually used for good purposes, at least two. I'll give you an example. So in Alberta in 2000, they used it to allow same-sex marriage. It's very hard to change our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, like I said. And so they used it basically to allow for same-sex marriage. 4 years later, incidentally, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that same-sex marriage was legal. And so they didn't have to renew it or anything like that. But they at least used it in a very positive way for a positive thing to help protect a group of people. This one is the exact opposite of that. And although I wouldn't have used it for that either, at least that was something positive that came out of it. This is just undercutting unions completely. And other unionized workers in Ontario, if he can do it to them, he can do it to you as well. Like, this is setting a horrible precedent for this. Because there's no... So certain things under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms can't be affected by the Notwithstanding Clause. For instance, elections. You can't change the terms for each election. There's a maximum term for how long a parliament can sit, and once that term is over, you can't change it from this notwithstanding clause, because you could create a dictatorship essentially if you just put the notwithstanding clause and said, "Oh, we're going to delay the election by another 5 years," and then you just keep renewing the notwithstanding clause. So you can't do things like that. But anything else in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, including the right to strike, and protections for being allowed to strike, can be wiped away. So let's say it's you who has to go out on strike next. Oh, well, let's give an example. Let's say staff at nursing homes need a new agreement, and the nursing homes and the government aren't giving anywhere near what they think their agreement should be. That would make it their right then to strike. But why can't Doug Ford in that future say, "Oh, but nursing homes are very important and we need to protect the old people, so you can't strike"? So how are you ever going to get a good agreement after that? And he can do that for any sector, by the way. There's nothing stopping him. And this is a person who has threatened using this notwithstanding clause multiple times over the years. Multiple times. He used it successfully. He's, by the way, the only time in Ontario it's ever been used already is by him. He's used it successfully once, and now he thinks that this is a great way to go around and just get whatever he wants, instead of having to, hold to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Now, I will say I'm slightly biased against this. I know a lot of people who are support staff. That being said, I don't necessarily agree with everything they're asking for. But at the same time, I think they have the right to ask, and I think they have the right to fight to get the best deal they can. But if they can't strike, then they're not going to get anywhere near the deal they want. Nowhere near. The government will never have to agree to anything. Because actually, it's more of a win for the government if they just, at that point, lengthen and stall talks. Because what can these people do about it if they do? So he set up a perfect winning scenario for the Ontario government. If they stall talks, that means that they don't have to pay anything more. So they're paying at the old rate. Now, yes, again, like I said, they will have to back pay these people for the time the contract's ended. But it then forces them to say, well, we want something. And people will get more and more desperate to the point where they're agreeing with a lot less. It shouldn't be a thing. It really shouldn't be a thing. What can you do about it? Honestly, unfortunately, there's not much that can be done. Realistically, you can talk to your member of provincial parliament if you live in Ontario. Ford has enough votes in Parliament that he can push this through. It's not like it's going to get stopped. But you can tell them that you're unhappy with it. You can tell them that you don't agree with it. He's still going to do it. He thinks this is the way to go. Instead of calling them, you can always write them a letter as well, if you wish. I think the biggest thing that a general person in Ontario can do is next election, just remember that this has happened. That's a hard thing to do because I understand that there's so much going on that, like and the news cycle is so ridiculous. Excuse me. The news cycle is so ridiculous that this can be forgotten in 6 months or less. But I think we need to remember the next time we vote, and maybe vote for a party who is less willing to skirt around the laws of our land in order to get what they want. Now, there is something other unions could do, which is very interesting. I didn't realize that this was possible. My mother and my grandparents, who I lived with, were all from England. my father's grandparents were also from England, but and so there was a giant strike in England in 1926. Basically, miners and factory workers were told that they were going to be paid less than they were being paid then, and they were also promised better safety protections, and that never happened. So they went out on strike. And not only did they go out on strike, over 1 million other people went out on strike too. It caused, I can't remember the exact number, but it was over, in 9 days. The strike lasted 9 days, by the way. And it caused a loss of over 163 million, some odd 100,000 days of work days essentially lost. To put that into another perspective, if the first ever human started work the day that they became human and worked to today, it would take them on another 150,000 years to catch up on that amount of work lost. It's somewhere very close to like 450,000 years of work lost. I think it's like 444,000 and some odd. So yeah, if you want more information about that, it's the general strike in 1926. And actually, something that happened after that strike is the UK banned the right to sympathetic striking. So what sympathetic striking is when people are like, no, I'm sympathetic to their cause, so I'm going to go out and strike for them too. Sympathetic striking is not illegal in Canada or in Ontario, interestingly enough. I thought it would have been. I had to double check that. That being said, if the strike is illegal in the first place, the sympathetic striking is as well. And so in this case, unfortunately, if they go on strike, that will be deemed an illegal strike. And if other people go on sympathetic strike, it will be deemed illegal. But here's my question to the unions and to the people in the unions. So unfortunately, only 27% of people in Ontario are unionized. That number, I think, should be a lot higher. That would certainly give unions a lot more power too. But what if 27% of Ontario went on strike? Just to say, we are completely against what Doug Ford is doing here. Do you think that would shut down Ontario? Do you think that Doug Ford would have enough power to put you guys all back? I mean, technically he would, but I don't think there are enough police to send 26% of all people back to work. And it wouldn't even have to be a long strike. It could be a day. It could be 2 days. It would shut down Ontario economy and send a message. That's all I'm saying. That is an option. I get that a lot of people are going to argue that it's not a good option. Really, right now, sadly, it's the only option. Because for anyone in those unions, I know the arguments you're going to make. Okay, I get it. Times are tough right now. A lot of people are in financial insecurity, let alone financial trouble. I get that. I appreciate that. But this is bigger than that is. If he can do it to them, he can do it to you as well. That's all I would say about it. He could do this to anyone striking at this point. He could just decide, oh, well, it's bad for my economy, or my economy is in trouble, so I'm just going to stop you from striking. Or use the nursing home workers as another example. Or like you could think of any way in which he could have a reason. And he doesn't even really have to have a reason. He just has to be able to pass the legislation that he could stop every strike he wanted. And so how do unions have power at that point? What do? They're stuck. So you kind of have to stop it at the beginning and send a message saying, we're not going to take this. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I'm disgusted that this is a thing. No matter what you think about the support staff strike. And by the way, don't believe everything you're reading in the media, because I know people that are part of that. I also know what the media is saying, and those two things aren't exactly the same. The truth is probably somewhere more in the middle of those two than either side that I've heard, but I've heard it from multiple people, and the media is not covering it in the same way. This isn't just about a money thing. Yes, they want more money for sure, but they also want things like more protection for EAs. EAs get bit, they get kicked, and most of the EAs are on contract. They aren't even full-time employees for the school. They're just contracted employees. So a school will keep an EA on contract and then say, oh, okay, we'll renew your contract a second time. And then after that, they have to hire them, or they have to get rid of them, essentially. And what they do is, oh, okay, so we'll give you full-time work, but by the way, you're going to be at one school for this time and one school for this time during the day. And so it's like a split shift. And like I say, they don't have protections. A lot of them, unfortunately, have to go out on workers' comp because a kid either bites them or kicks them or something happens to them. And so they're trying to get protections for that as well. I do think personally they're asking for too much money. That's my opinion on it. At a time where I get it and I don't get it. So if you don't ask for a lot, I'm guessing that the people that are, actually working on trying to get stuff, I'm guessing that they've put out this number, which is an extremely high number. I think it's something like 11% increase in pay or something like that, hoping that the government will give them something like 5%, and then they'll be like, yeah, fine, we're good with that. That's my hope anyway. I know that if, like, for instance, you want 5% and you're going into a deal, you don't ask for 5%, because then you're going to get guaranteed less than 5%. Because it's going to be a compromise in between. So I'm guessing that's what they're wanting. I'm hoping anyway, because when everyone is struggling, 11% seems incredible. But yeah. So why is this important to non-unionized people in Ontario? Have you ever worked a minimum wage job? Do you get overtime pay? Are your workplace safety standards, protecting you? Do you have maternity or parental leave? Do you get vacation pay? All of those things were created by unions. How about protection from discrimination and harassment? How about the ending of child labor, workers' comp, pensions, and other benefits like healthcare and childcare? All those things were given to all workers because of the work that unions did. That's when they had the power to do that. Now they're being cut out at the legs, like I say. Anyway, that's just my opinion. I kind of wanted to highlight what was going on and why it was happening. But yeah, I don't like what's happening personally. It's less about the strike and it's more about what Ford is doing to try and get around the strike. But I mean, that's where we are. If anyone knows where a good place to live, I'm going to start looking into it, I think. I say that partly in jest and partly in truth. I don't know. Things that have been happening lately, I'm just like, in Canada and in Ontario, I'm just like, this used to be a great place and now it's not so great, in my opinion. Hopefully it can become great again. But anyway, that's just my opinion, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.